Previously on Podcast Without Pretense. Shut up, Iyaz.
I mean, there's just no way he can recover from that. He'll be out for weeks.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Strickland.
And I'm Eric Sandine.
And together we are 2/3 of one of the best podcasts of 2014. Just stay tuned. We're going to make it.
Yep.
Iyaz will hopefully join us a little later in the show. Probably not much later. We had some technical glitches that delayed our start a little bit. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm tired, man. This is a tough week. It's been a really hard week. Tomorrow is my is technically my Friday because I get our company gets the day off on Friday because we hit some company goals, so everyone gets the day off. But that meant that to pack in all the work into 4 days meant I did a whole lot of stuff. So I shot, first of all, great news for me on my front. My show Forward Thinking, which had been on hiatus for 3 months, is coming back.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I had all but given up hope that it was going.
Did you get a different sponsor, or is it still?
No, Toyota's our sponsor. Toyota's our sponsor, and it was just one of those things where there were discussions way above my head about what to do. Everyone still wanted the show to go, but there was like discussions about how to plan out who does what. And honestly, I had nothing to do with that. I write the show and I host the show. Strangely enough, that means I have very little to do with whether the show is happening. But that's because it's a sponsored show, right? So it's complicated. Yeah. But we are starting up again, season 4. We shot 4 episodes yesterday. So last night I went into the office because I had taken yesterday off as a day off. And by a day off, I mean I ended up going into the office and worked from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. shooting videos. And we shot 4 episodes. Those will start airing, I believe, next week. We're going to do 2 in December.
Oh, that's fast.
Yeah, 2 in December, 7 in January. And then... because we're catching up because we're starting later than what normally we would have started in October, but we're catching up because we didn't have episodes in October, and so we're gonna have 7 episodes in January, and since we shot 4, that means we've got 2 of those episodes already done. We're gonna shoot 4, I believe, at CES for Forward Thinking, and I think I'm gonna try and shoot about 5 videos for How Stuff Works, so that's 9 total while we're at CES. So that's going to be very busy. But yeah, I shot 4 episodes of Forward Thinking yesterday. I shot an episode of How Stuff Works Now this morning, 2 episodes of Brain Stuff this afternoon, a pickup for Forward Thinking after that, plus a live Periscope for How Stuff Works, and I wrote 2 pieces for the website. So today was particularly busy. Yesterday was rough too. So tomorrow it's a special episode of Tech Stuff with Iyaz. He's joining me for an episode. We're going to do our 2016 predictions, and then another episode with Joe McCormick, and we're going to talk about the story of the Moog synthesizer.
Oh, sweet!
That's awesome. That should be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of those. Especially, I've put off buying one of the make your own Moog synth kits for a long time. And I definitely need to at some point.
Yeah,
I used to know a guy who was obsessed with analog recording, and his house was full of Moog synthesizers that were worth more than most of the things in my house.
Yeah, our producer Noel, he's a musician and plays keyboards as well as other stuff. And so I asked him. I said, "Hey, would you mind doing some post-production work on this episode, because this one's not scheduled. I think the Moog episode will air on January 20th, which sounds like it's really far away, but because of Christmas, New Year's, CES, and a vacation I'll be taking at the beginning of February, I've had to really schedule out my episodes way ahead of time so that I don't fall behind. but then I was like, yeah, this will give you plenty of time to do some post-production work on this episode and make it, make some really cool music for it. So he's really excited about that. And I'm excited too, because he's a great musician. Yeah. So yeah, it's really exciting. But man, when you create content that is scheduled to come out at a particular time, and you do your best to never slip a date. I mean, so not like this show, but like other shows.
Like actual shows.
Yeah, the holidays are can be pretty tough.
Yeah, it's weird. I just realized today I have Christmas Eve off and Christmas, and I have New Year's Eve off and New Year's, and I just realized today that my next 2 weeks are only 3 days long. And the reason that's scary is that it means that there will be a total of like 4 days where I'm not doing anything, and it means that pretty much each Monday is going to be absolutely insane.
It also means that people hold on to your hats, because Eric will probably go on some sort of domain name buying rampage when given enough time.
I've cleared out a lot of those. I let Pope.sexy expire, I think.
Wow. It's a new era.
I'm not really worried about somebody else domain squatting that one, though, but it might happen.
I just renewed largenerdroncollider.com because I got the notification like it was that was about to expire, and it tells you like, oh, it's $12 for a year to keep the domain. And I thought, okay, and then I looked to see, all right, what if I want 2 years? Oh, that's $24. All right, what about 3 years? $36. I'm like, wait a minute, you don't save any money. Why would I ever not go year to year? If I just decide it's not worth it anymore, I can stop.
Here's the reason. SEO optimization.
That's fair. Well, and also
that's the only reason, however.
There is one other reason I can think of, which is that if you do it in advance, if they hike the price later, you got in under a lower price from the beginning.
That's true. Yeah.
So if next year it's $13, then I'll be like, I was such a fool. But,
I'm doing this 10 years out.
I could have saved like $1 and a year if I had purchased them ahead of time. But it's funny because this is one of those podcasting for fun. It's one of those hobbies where you continuously pour money into it and never get anything back.
It's true. There was a good article about of course, like, I don't care about this particularly, but there was a good article about like being famous on YouTube. A couple days ago. Yeah. And how like you won't make any actual money. And I doubt anyone's going to run up to me on the street and be like, "Hey, you were in PWP." But yeah,
like if you look, I've got a video on YouTube right now.
Producing content takes a ton of time. Like,
it takes a lot of time and effort, and if you're doing it yourself, it does take money, because you're talking about the initial investment of just the equipment, whether that, whatever stuff that might be, a camera, a microphone, maybe some other stuff like, mixers and stuff if you want to get a little fancy, at least some software. Even if you're getting free software, you're putting in time to learn it and use it and get good at it. And time is money too, ultimately. So it's a big investment on the part of the creator, and you have to, if you don't love it, there's no reason to get into it, because the
you will not make money.
The chances of you making money are like I realize how rare a position I'm in with doing podcasts and video for a living. It's not many people get to do that, and I'm not an independent, right? Like a lot of the people out there are independent contractors who. Or they've created their own brand and they're completely independent. I'm the employee of a company, and that's how I do it. But if I were going independent, I don't think I'd be making enough money to make a living.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe I would.
There's very few people that do. Tom Merritt is one, and I can't name you.
There's some folks. There's like there's some folks who. Like there are some folks on YouTube who legitimately are making, 7 figures or more, like PewDiePie, but it's just like looking at Hollywood and looking at the actors and actresses at Hollywood. that's a teeny tiny percentage of all the people who have tried and tried and tried to break
Right.
into film and television. I mean, it's a tiny percentage.
Well, and people
It's
think it's a really low barrier at this point, but
yeah.
it's not.
Well,
I mean,
you
it's a
probably
low
think
barrier to create, but
yeah.
it's impossible to. It's very hard to monetize.
It's hard to monetize. It's hard to be discovered, right? I mean, there's some
Yeah.
great discovery tools out there. Some of it is essentially automatic, and then there's some stuff where occasionally someone of note discovers your stuff and shares it, and that's awesome. That's where you can get a bit of a boost. Like for a good example of that was the video I did of the transatlantic accent for House
Oh,
of
right.
Cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where someone enjoyed it and shared it to Reddit. It got upvoted a ton, and then it got spread all over the place. Like AV Club covered it, Laughing Squid, a couple of other places, and now it has like 1.2 million views on YouTube. It's my most viewed video, I think, because most people don't know me from video. Most people know me from podcasts or articles.
Yep.
But it's my most viewed video at 1.2 million, and that's tiny compared to what some of these like true YouTube celebrities are doing, like on a regular basis. Like if they said they only got 1.2 million, that's an indication, right? Whereas that's the most I've ever had for one of my videos.
Yeah,
The
it's definitely
WWE
weird.
one has got like 800,000, something like that.
That's pretty good.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not bad. So
I
I might be off on that one. Now I kind of have to look.
I was going to tell you about the no segue for this, but I was going to tell you
Okay.
I did the escape room, the puzzle thing. Right?
Oh right, how was that?
So there's two of them in San Francisco. There's and each of them there's one in Japantown that's apparently much harder, like to start out with. But so the one we went to had 3 different rooms, and they were of like varying difficulty, I guess. So like the one we did, I think the time they allot you is an hour. If you're not done in an hour, you fail, right? So that was cool, and it was our team, so it was 6 people, which is a little much. Usually it's between 4 and 5, but we had the extra one, so we're just like, well, it's fine. It was pretty cool. Like I enjoyed it. I'll get my annoyed part of it out of the way really quick, which is that one of the puzzles they reset incorrectly, and it probably cost us about 5 or 8 minutes, which made sure that we didn't get the record time for that week. So that was annoying.
But you did get out.
Yeah, we got out in 45 minutes. The record time was about 43 for the week.
So
I think if the puzzle had been reset, we would have gotten it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those super tricky things, right? Like it's something where, if you set up a puzzle, then you do need to make sure that the starting position of everything is just right, or else it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
But, and the part we got stuck on, it was mainly that there was an action that needed to be completed to open a cabinet. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the cabinet was open. So we had this puzzle that we knew was a puzzle, and we're sitting there trying to figure out what it did, wasting brain power on that, while parts of the other team were working on this cabinet that had another puzzle in it. But the action, and we were right about how to solve the puzzle that was supposed to open the cabinet.
Right.
But then
because the cabinet was already open, it looked like there was nothing happening.
Like it has to do something.
Yeah, I gotcha. Was there like a theme to the room?
Yeah, so ours was an art collector who had an art collector / thief who had stolen the Mona Lisa, and so it was a series of 4 rooms to solve. So you got to the Mona Lisa at the end, and there was a final puzzle to open it. And so, really, a lot of the puzzles were the puzzles were actually relatively simple going through it. It was mainly so the first room we went into, most of the puzzles were very simple, and you kind of just looked at each clue you got and you knew what it was supposed to do. You just had to find the thing to do it. So like most of the first room was just disassembling the room and then finding we had to find chess pieces to set up a chess game to open the next room. So a lot of that was relatively straightforward. I could see how they could have made it much more complex. Some of the puzzles that were interesting, actually, the final puzzle was really interesting to me. And spoiler, if any of you guys are in San Francisco and going to go to this, which I kind of doubt because nobody's watching. But the final puzzle was interesting because most of the puzzles work through just magnetics, right? So like the puzzle pieces, magnets detect or the chess game, magnets detect the pieces on the board, then release a magnet for a door or something like that.
Gotcha.
The final puzzle used a Connect. So the Mona Lisa is in this room by itself, and there's just footprints on the floor, and you have to stand there, and you have to figure out how to open the case for the Mona Lisa somehow. And there's really no clues to it other than the fact that the Mona Lisa is blacked out, other than the smile on her face. And so the actual way you open it was powered by a Kinect, and so you had to stand in the spot and smile, and the Kinect detected that and opened the case. So that part was pretty interesting. The other puzzles were not super complicated. I'd be really interested to go to one of the more complicated rooms. And of course, some of the things that got us were just too simple for us to think about, because you're priming yourself that everything's going to be clever or hard or something like that. And some of the puzzles were just stupid. So you immediately start overthinking it, and you're like, oh, yeah, it was the thing that was probably in everybody's head the whole time, but that sounded too simple. One of them was, there was a typewriter that printed out this sheet of the, I don't know, 3 blind mice or something like that. And it kept going. And there were errors in different letter patterns throughout the sheet. And it was the code to a safe. So we're trying to figure out where the errors are occurring in the line to see if there's any specific frequency for a code that could be the combination of the safe. When in fact, it was just literally the code was the numbers that were in each line. So yeah, part of it is just the overthinking part of it. Don't think it's more complicated than it is. Sometimes the answer is extremely simple.
Right.
It's fun.
Well, that's. I would love to try one of those. Atlanta has a ton of them. There are at least 6 or 7 different companies that do them, and most of them have more than one room experience. Some are for smaller groups and some are for bigger groups. I've never done any of them. I have a friend who worked at, I don't know if she still does, but I know she used to work at one of them and would recommend which ones to try. So I've always wanted to try it out and find out what the experience is like. I just haven't taken the time to organize a group to do it. I have a feeling that if I don't organize it, I'll never get a chance to try one.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I would do it again. I would actually get a group of friends together to do it. It was interesting. Yeah.
I can't imagine how hard it is to plan something like that. It's kind of like writing a mystery novel. Yeah.
The mystery part of it, and also the technical part. Just the way that they actually actuate everything. Because I was sitting there at one point and I was like, there's cameras in each room. I almost bet they're just watching and then unlocking things as they see us figure things out. And then I talked to the guy afterwards and he's like, no, I was setting up a different room. It's actually all automated.
Wow.
He's like, we'll check in to make sure that certain things happen as you go, but we don't have to watch it at all other than reset it when it's done. And I was like, that's actually good. it would be fun for me to actually program some of those puzzles, because they were like, I mean, it's relatively simple because like, so the difference between the rooms and things like that is literally just a big electromagnet, right? So it's an on-off switch. It's like, oh yeah, that this is done, open this. But of course,
Well, I mean,
writing the story is
you can't make it
way more
too
complex.
complicated because you don't want to make it so difficult that there is a very low chance for success, because then it'll
Right.
feel like people might feel like they were cheated out of something if they don't feel like they were close to getting out, even if they didn't make it, but they were at least
They
close.
got to
Then
the
they
last
can,
room or something. Yeah.
yeah, they can say like, oh, we almost made it. But if it's so difficult that they don't ever make it out of the first room, then that would be just frustrating and would reflect poorly. It's a very delicate thing to design a puzzle that's meant to be just challenging enough. I mean, it's similar in many ways
Right.
to like video games, trying to figure out what's the difficulty level of a video game to make it fun and not an exercise in frustration. Although some games are specifically about frustrating the user, but that's more about what the game is, right? Yeah, I would love to see like a behind the scenes documentary on putting a puzzle room together and going from like the initial concept to the final implementation,
Right.
and seeing how much changed between the two.
Well, and I think one of the things that was interesting to me too is we were talking to the people that worked there afterwards, and we were like, "So, what is the actual success rate of like each of these rooms?" And they're like, actually, our easy room, the success rate is only slightly above 50%. So that's solving it within the hour. So like,
So
people
do you,
usually make it out of the first room, but
right.
and the success of the hard room was, I think she said like 35, 40.
Now,
But they specifically tell people not to do that one first. So.
Do you think they're being honest with that, or do you think that's blowing smoke to make you feel better about being one of the success ones?
I don't think so, because they told us that beforehand.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And they had, and honestly, if the average time, or rather, if the record time for the room we did for the week was 42 minutes, then I wouldn't be surprised if most people don't solve it.
Gotcha.
You know?
I love the concept. It's just like I love the idea of alternate reality games, the ones that involve real world actions that then are part of the in-game progression. Usually this is like a marketing thing. In fact, the trend has kind of died. I don't see very many of these days, but it was a big deal with marketing for usually with movies or video games. Like it was an alternate reality game.
Ingress was probably the most well thought out one I can think of that I played in for a long time.
Well, Ingress also had the advantage of not requiring new puzzles to come out to continue the game. The game was pitting two different groups of players against each other, and that way the players provide most of the conflict. They just have to keep the game running, right? And make sure that one side doesn't just totally run away with it and then end the game prematurely. So you figure there's got to be some correction in there somehow. If one city is super high in the Enlightenment population, what are the rest of the people supposed to do, right?
Honestly, though, I think that they didn't have to do much correction for a lot of that, because users themselves would see things like that. So like, especially in Albuquerque, there was an active group of like both groups of things. So if the city was overtaken by Enlightenment or whatever, then the smaller, scrappier underdog group would start recruiting people to play.
I gotcha.
So they built in their own thing. Yeah.
That's a lot better. I mean, because if most alternate reality games, they create puzzles, and a community starts to grow up around the solving of those puzzles. Very quickly, people will start to share knowledge with each other, which means that puzzles get solved way faster than if it were a bunch of individuals. It's not individual players, it's communities of players. So you get a communal body of expertise, and you might come up with a puzzle that one person would never be able to solve in a million years, but because they're part of a larger community, the community solves it. And then it may be that that person who was useless on one puzzle is the key to solving another puzzle. And the challenge for those games, for the people who are running them, is to come up with puzzles that are sufficiently difficult and to do it on a frequency that is satisfying to the players. Because the thing I would see is that puzzles would get solved in less than an hour after being released to the public, and then everyone's waiting again. And also the players themselves would make assumptions about the game, and then the people writing the game would say, "Holy crap, that's a much better idea than what we were thinking. Let's do that." So it's like laying down the train tracks while the train is running full speed right behind you, right?
Yeah.
You're constantly just trying to stay ahead. And the same thing I think is true of the puzzle games, like the puzzle rooms, is that you're figuring out what is the right sequence for someone to go through this and it be a challenge but still be achievable. Like, I don't know how you even I'm not an expert on game theory by any stretch of the imagination. So for me, that's like magic. So that's kind of like why I would love to see a behind the scenes on that. Like how was it from conception to execution? How did it happen?
And it's got to be, especially for like the puzzle rooms, right? It's got to be extremely hard to play test, because you don't want to bring in random people to play test it, because they're not going to understand really what's going on. But of course you have to, because it's the only way you can really play test it. Yeah. Like, you can't have somebody who's used to doing this play test it, because it won't, unless there's some innate knowledge that puzzle designers kind of have, where they know, that a normal person would not understand this or be able to figure this out in this amount of time, which maybe is possible. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you encounter, like, let's say that you play a few different puzzle room games, and you get really good at recognizing things. Like, it starts to teach you how to observe a room and pick out the things that are important and ignore the things that are not important.
And that's what happened with this one. After getting through the first room, you're already primed to just sit there and go, okay, I know what's going to be actuating something in this room.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So it's interesting, because I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that takes fun out of it. It just changes the nature of the experience, which is kind of awesome, really. I'm glad that you had that experience, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And now I want to really do it even more. So
it's totally worth doing.
Yeah, maybe after the CES, I'll try one.
It would be good with a lot of friends. Like, I would like to try it with a lot of friends. Like, I did it with my the people I work with, which, kind of maybe actually made it easier, because all of us already knew how we all thought. Because a bunch of them are developers and engineers, so it's kind of like, okay, we're all relatively good at debugging, problem solving.
Right, exactly. Like, you're already of a mindset that's methodical, and so that is really helpful. See, if I do this, I plan on playing with some of my friends who are all actors and musicians. So God help us.
That would actually be fun. I think
to observe. Like on a similar note, this wasn't a puzzle room. There wasn't really a puzzle. There was one moment where, as a participant, you could have affected the outcome early on in the experience, but there was not really any way of knowing without having knowledge beforehand. But in Ireland, when we did a vacation there, me and my wife went with another couple, two friends of ours, who actually live out in the Bay Area. It's my friends Lena and Chris works for Google. And we had all decided to take a vacation to Ireland together for a week. And one of the places we went to in Dublin, it was at the end of our trip. We flew into Dublin and then went everywhere in Ireland and then came back to Dublin. We went to the Leprechaun Museum, which we did. Becca and I, my wife and I, we did not go to during the day. We went in the evening because they had a kind of a interactive theater experience that was based in leprechaun folklore. And we were when we came in, we were all given a role. Everyone had a character that they had to play, and so I ended up being given the role of police officer. My friend Chris was given the role of my girlfriend, so he had a wig on, and he's like 6 inches taller than I am, so my arm, like, he would constantly raise his arms like, ah, and so my arms being pulled over my head. My friend Lena became an Elvis impersonator, and my wife was the town seamstress, so she had knitting needles. And the thing is, my wife actually knows how to knit, so she started knitting with the knitting needles.
Strange group for
it was supposed to be it was supposed to be a little Irish village, and so these are all characters. The Elvis impersonator was the weirdest one.
I was gonna say, is that normal in Irish villages to have?
She was supposed to be like the town entertainer, but for some reason had a particular obsession about Elvis. But there were other people in the group too, right? Like, we were just 4 out of a group of, I don't know, like 12, and everyone else was playing other characters. And we would go room to room in this museum, which they had turned off like all the lights. It was terrifying walking through there because I'm like having my hands out to make sure I don't bump into anyone or anything. And it was an interesting theatrical experience where the story unfolds as we go from place to place, but we also had to do stuff. Like, we had to actively try and do things to get out of one room to another. It was very low key compared to a puzzle room experience, because we were very much like, our hands were being held the whole way, because it was more about storytelling than solving a mystery. But what was funny was that Lena, my friend Lena, and I, and even Becca, have all had improvisational theater experience. So we were really.
Oh, so you guys were just hamming it up, yeah.
Oh, and Lena's husband Chris, because he was playing a lady, he just was having a total blast, because he's a ham too. He doesn't have the theatrical background, but he is naturally a very outgoing, outlandish sort of personality. So we're having the time of our lives, and we're the 4 people in the entire group who haven't been drinking.
Right.
So everyone else was just amused by us, and we got to a point where it was clear that things were not going the way the storytellers had planned for them to go. We found out later it was the first night they were running this particular story.
Oh.
They had just switched from one to another, and things were going wrong. And we were starting to pick up on the fact that things were going wrong, but it wasn't ruining the night. It was actually more charming because of the stuff going wrong. There was a point where we were allowed to leave things behind in a room, which was a trap, as it turns out, because leaving something behind meant that the fairies would get something that belongs to you and then have a connection to you, and then they can make mischief because they already have in their possession something that belongs to you.
Yeah, right.
But we weren't told that. We were just said, hey, if you want to leave those things behind, you can just set them down here. And it didn't know that it was that we were being led into a trap. Well, one of the things we had was a vial of liquid that one of the other characters was carrying. We didn't know that he was supposed to hold on to that. He just thought, oh, I can leave this behind, so he sets it down. We move into this other room where, before we can go any further, he has to use the vial of liquid on somebody. And the person leading us is like, so where'd you put the liquid? He says, I left it over by the fairy tree. He says,
I dropped everything over there.
He says, you did. That was not supposed to happen. And this is, hold on just 1 minute. And he runs out of the room. And so now we're unescorted. It's just us. And so there's like 40 seconds of silence. And then I said, so who's from out of town? And then he runs back and he says, all right, well, the fairies have cleared everything away. They've been really efficient tonight, so let's just go with this bowl of water. So it was just so funny. I mean, like, we thought that made it even more enjoyable because it was just, again, it was this charming experience, and we didn't think it was any worse for the weird faux pas or whatever. And we had a
Yeah.
blast getting out of it. And afterward, the two things that people kept saying to us, the people who were running the show, said, you were cracking us all up behind the stage by saying things like, so who's from out of town? And they were also impressed that my wife had knitted about 40 lines of stitches.
Oh, they actually
during the
gave her
process.
yarn and needles.
Yeah,
Nice.
they gave her yarn and needles, and she actually started to knit. And they said, we didn't expect you to do that. She says, I can take the stitches out if you want. They're like, no, leave it.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
it was a great experience. I highly recommend it. If you go to Dublin, Ireland, especially if you've had a drink or two in you first, do the evening experience. And it's an adult oriented storytelling session. It's based on some of the more racy and risque folklore. Nothing like ridiculously Game of Thrones ish, but it's definitely not for kids.
pretty awesome. That actually sounds really interesting. It sounds fun. Like I would totally do that. Yeah,
I definitely recommend, especially if you enjoy getting into it. Like if you're someone who finds those kind of things intensely uncomfortable, it is not for you because they will turn attention on you throughout the night. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, the puzzle room was. I would recommend just doing it. It's fun. We were actually, all of us were surprisingly sober for that because actually the reason we were sober was because it was the birthday party for one of the people in our company who doesn't drink. And so just like, oh, we have to find something to do. What do we do if we don't go to bars?
now, did any of the rooms have any actors involved, or was it all like just the stuff in the room?
It was all just the people. I think the Japantown one has actors. The one we did there, yeah, it was no actors. It was just like you got a room, tear it apart. And like that's the thing. It took us like maybe a minute and a half to realize, oh, we just need to tear this room apart and figure out what's in here, and then tore the room apart. Yeah,
right. I can't imagine what it's like to have to put all that back. Like you said, one of your puzzles wasn't put back properly, so there must be a checklist or something to make sure that each piece, each room is where it needs to be.
That's the thing. We get back out after it, and we're like, so what did the music box do? And he's like, oh, that was supposed to open up the jewelry cabinet, and we're like, oh. Yeah, that wasn't set up properly.
Yeah. That's tough. I mean, like, I wonder how long it takes to reset a room, too, right? Like
it took them 15 minutes.
Wow.
Of course, with one puzzle not set correctly, but then again, it was a matter of they probably just didn't close the door correctly, so it didn't make contact with the magnet.
Right. So it didn't match. Yeah.
But yeah, we got there when the team that was before us had just gotten out. And between that time, it was about 10, 15 minutes. So
that's pretty impressive.
And it was just two of them. I mean, honestly, it's a pretty good way to make cash if you only have to staff 3 rooms with 2 people and you have it running the whole time. $30 a head. That's not bad.
No, it's not bad. I mean, obviously, you need to make it a compelling experience if you hope to have, good word of mouth. That's
what I'm wondering is how often they turn over those puzzles, because I know that there's big groups that do it nationwide, and I'll bet that they have lots of turnaround because they just probably get a big warehouse space and then erect fake walls, and then you can change puzzles wherever. This one seemed relatively more independent because the rooms were actual rooms in a building in the financial district in San Francisco. So there definitely had to be a lot of custom stuff done each time. So they might not turn over their puzzles very often.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. Like Geek and Sundry did a puzzle room, and they shot the video of them doing it. So I thought at the time while I was watching, thought they must be ready to change this puzzle room entirely because otherwise you could watch this video and see how to solve at least some of the puzzles,
Yeah.
if not all of them. But that one also had actors involved, and watching that, I just thought, man, that's got to be a grueling experience to be in character and not give too much help, but give enough help.
Yeah.
Like anytime you're given a character that you have to improvise as, and you have no help, like it's just you and the audience, that is hard. Because I've done it once in a it was like a murder mystery, except it was a ghost tour murder mystery type thing. And in the ghost tour, different characters got different groups of the audience. And then individually, you had to work with the audience and tell them a story and get them invested in what was going on. And then afterward, there's a moment where you all have to rejoin together. So it was all timed out very carefully so that shit goes wrong simultaneously in all the different rooms. And I think there were 5 of us. So in 5 different rooms throughout this building, weird stuff all had to happen at the same time. And it was really tricky. And then after that, you all had to rejoin each other in the main room and finish out the story. And the whole time I was doing it, you had to hold that group there for like 25 minutes by yourself. You feel it.
Right.
After about 15 or 16 minutes, you're like,
minutes? That's a long
25 minutes.
Yeah.
So after about 15 or 16 minutes, you're like, okay, what am I gonna do to keep us here and to keep them entertained? Yeah.
How many knock jokes do I know?
And it was a ghost tour thing. So for me, like everyone had different stuff to play with, to do their stuff. And my character was had electronic voice phenomena. I had made a tape by using I started recording my own voice, and then I started manipulating the sound so that it was really weird and distorted, and then I ran that through a few times and used that as my piece. That I had set up a recording in this room, and now we're going to listen back to it. And the thing was that at the end of it, the idea was that all the ghost tour guides have been possessed by different ghosts involved in this one tragedy. And then they all act out the tragedy. So in my room, it was the character who possesses me, the ghost that possesses me, it was all of his lines that had been distorted. So that people, if they listened very carefully, would start to be able to make out certain phrases. And then in the big sequence where all the tragedy is acted out again, so it's essentially people get to see what had happened to create this haunted house. They heard the lines. I said the same lines, and then they're like, "Oh, that's what that meant," when we heard it back in the room.
Okay. Yeah.
But man, that was really hard, and I don't think I ever want to do it again.
I wouldn't want to have to entertain a room in character for 25 minutes. That sounds horrible.
It was a little much. I kind of wish that we could have. I wish that we had workshopped it more. It was also one of those difficult things. Like everyone involved, they weren't amateur-ish, but they all were amateur actors, right? Like I include myself in that. I mean, I've been paid for acting a couple of times, but I'm not a professional actor. That's not my job.
Right.
And it wasn't the job of anyone else in that cast either. They were all very good. But it meant that because we're not professional and because we didn't, we have quote unquote real jobs, finding time to get together and workshop stuff and make sure it made sense was difficult. So we were very limited in how frequently we could get together and make sure that our concept really made sense. And I would argue at the end of the day, when we were starting to perform it, that it was lacking a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great concept. The execution was problematic at best.
I mean, I guess with any performance like that where you're requiring people to do improv in the middle and during a plot is going to be very, very hard and very weird. I'd actually be super interested to see the puzzle rooms where there's actors, because that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess it depends on it depends on how the execution goes. Like the one I saw, the one that the Geek and Sundry did, the guy was near catatonic. He was supposed to be a prisoner of essentially a serial killer, sort of like a Buffalo Bill kind of serial killer. And so there's this guy who's I think might have just been in his underwear, chained in a bathroom that was only accessible through a hatch in a tunnel from the main room. They had to find the way to unlock the hatch, and then climb through a dark tunnel. And on the other side is this nearly naked dude babbling to himself. And I'm like, yeah, that's a little unnerving. Don't know how I would handle that.
That's rough. That's odd. I think one of the rooms that in the place that we went is the Alcatraz room, where everybody actually starts chained to handcuffed to a jail cell. That's actually the one that most people didn't solve, because you had to as a team, you had to figure out how to release everyone, and like the people that worked there were just like, yeah, people really aren't good at that one.
Wow. Yeah, I would imagine that the way that works is that each person has the ability to find something that will unlock someone else.
And I think that's how it works. However, like I'm amused by the prospect that there are people who don't figure that out, but then sit there handcuffed inside the cell for an hour.
Or there are people who figure it out, they get themselves unlocked, and then they're like, you guys are just going to sit here for the next 55 minutes chained to a cell.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Well, I'm guessing that Iyaz is probably not going to make it tonight. He's looking after one of his doggies who is injured and is in recovery. So we wish Iyaz's doggie well and a swift recovery.
As well, apparently. But you said he's doing.
Yeah, my puppy. Yeah, this morning, essentially the order of operations was such: Tybalt wakes up, Tybalt stretches, Tybalt jumps off the couch, Tybalt throws up. Tybalt throws up again. As I clean up the mess, Tybalt throws up again, and one more time.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I was concerned. I thought, well, this could be anything. It could be that he ate something that didn't agree with him, but it's weird that, because it wasn't like he went outside and ate something and then got sick. He woke up and was sick. So then I was like, well, it's probably, if it was something he ate, it's weird that it took this long to affect him. If it's a bug or something, maybe that could be it. But we were worried about him. But we took him into the vet, and they said that he perked up pretty quickly. He ate a can of food while he was there, kept it down. He was fine. So we picked him up. He was playful for a little bit and then settled down. He was very tired, which I'm not surprised by. But he also ate some more when he was here. So I'm hopeful that everything's fine now and that he doesn't wake us up in the middle of the night with another problem. But he's adorable.
I would say maybe he's pregnant, but I don't think that's...
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's possible for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's when I left him just before coming down here to do the podcast, he was cuddled up to me and falling asleep. So he was very upset that I came downstairs. But my wife,
I'll go back and hang out with you.
Yeah, I better do that. So I guess we're gonna wrap up. Let's see. Was Iyaz do? Oh, right. Next time on Podcast Without Pretense, guys, I'm still stuck in the puzzle room.
I mean, February was nice, but I'm liking March so far. My birthday's coming up. It'll be great.